If you're using Terraform with SAP BTP, there's probably one big pain point that you are facing, and that's how do I identify resources that are not managed by Terraform? And once I identify them, how do I get the import block for them? Now we have a project to make your life easier with importing resources called Terraform Exporter for SAP BTP. But there are some new features within Terraform that might give you another spin on this story of how to detect unmanaged resources and then how to move forward with them. You might have seen that with the latest release of Terraform 1.14 that came out, I think, end of last year, so end of 2025, that there is a new command in the Terraform CLI which is called Terraform Query. This command requires a special resource type, so-called list resources, in order to work. And if you have those resources, you can then query your infrastructure, so get information about the infrastructure, and also generate import blocks as well as resource configurations based on the results of those list resources of the Terraform query command. Those query files have a special structure. So they have a new block type that's called the list block. And in addition, they have a special file postfix. So it's .tfquery.hcl that identifies those query configuration files. Now you might say, okay, I already had data sources, right, where I could get all the information from my resources and work with it. That's perfectly true, but with the data sources, you didn't get back the information. What are the keys that you need for your import of the resources? And this is a gap that this new resource type on the provider side, but also those new commands fix. So the main point that those resources return is the import identity, or the resource identity, how it's called, that you need in order to import stuff. And that is also the reason why we started with list resources on the Terraform provider. Now, when you're watching the video, I'm presenting it for version 121 of the provider. So we have not fully covered all the resources that we have and that we could import with list resources, but we are on our way there. And with these resources, you can do this querying. Now, with the vanilla Terraform CLI, you can of course do the querying and you can also generate the code, but you cannot distinguish which resources are managed and which are unmanaged by Terraform. That's why we thought it might make sense to take a look at that and maybe bring up some functionality that could close this gap. And we are currently in a kind of POC mode, so experimenting a bit, seeing if things works out like we think. And yeah, we would like to hear your opinion on that. Now, to showcase you what we have tried out, I would like to switch to a SAP BTP account. So we have a global account here. We have a directory. We have 2 sub-accounts. Now, one sub-account is managed by Terraform. The other one is not managed. This one is the managed one. However, this sub-account has a Cloud Foundry environment inside of it that is not managed by Terraform. The other one is unmanaged and is completely empty, so not very complex setup, I admit. But for the sake of the demo, let's stick to that one. And let's see how my Terraform configuration looks like. So I have here in the tests directory a few files. The main file where I have some resources that I created via Terraform. And as you can see here, this is my project for experiments. That's this one. This is managed by Terraform. As you can see, the resource for the BTP environment instance is missing, as well as the second sub-account. I also have a provider TF file. I have a backend TF file. Now you might say, why a backend TF file? I see that the state is local. Well, for the sake of the demo and for showcasing that in principle this would also work with remote backends, which would be the usual use case, I guess. I created this backend configuration and said, okay, create me this local Terraform state. Now, let's see how the CLI that we have created would work. Now, from a, let's say, from the perspective of the flow, what does the CLI do? The CLI fetches the state data because then it knows which resources are managed by Terraform. And then it uses the TF query functionality in order to get all the information that is available on the platform. It combines that and filters what resources are managed, what are unmanaged, and then it asks me if it should create the import blocks for the unmanaged resources, because that's, I think, the main scenario. We could, of course, also create the resource configuration, but I think the import blocks are the more important one. Now you might say, hey, you also have a project that's called BTP Exporter for SAP BTP. How does this come together? Well, the exporter, of course, also makes your life easier when you want to import resources from your platform that are not managed by Terraform. But the exporter, of course, was created before those list resources have arrived. And hence you yourself have to find out what resources are managed by Terraform and what resources are not managed by Terraform. Now let's take a look how this new POC experiment looks like, how it feels like. So I have compiled it locally. So let's start the CLI. And the first thing that it does, it asks me, where is your provider TF located in order to do the initialization. So that was under tests provider.tf. Then it asks me where my backend configuration is living because it needs to pull the state. So that's also tests, and that's backend.tf. Okay. Now it asked me what resources should I investigate on, and I made a list for that. So I want to investigate sub-accounts and I want to investigate environment instances. So let's go. Now it knows that for environment instances, the configuration also requires a sub-account ID because it needs to know where to look for this resource. So let's go here, copy the sub-account ID and key it in, and let's go. So now it's processing the resource type one by one and already hands us over the result. Now let's scroll through that. So what did this POC detect? It detected that there are two resources that are available. One is managed by Terraform, one is not managed by Terraform. And we can see that this 503 sub-account, that's the one that I copied in before, is managed, as we would expect it. So that's my project for experiments. And the second project is not managed. Okay, cool. Then it tells me, okay, there is also this runtime environment, and that's completely not managed by Terraform, but there is also no other runtime that it found via the query command. So overall, we have one sub-account in state that is managed and one is unmanaged. We have one environment instance that's in the provider but not in the state. So that's something where we have a mismatch. And now it asks me if it should create the import blocks for the two unmanaged resources, and I key in yes. Then it asks me where to put the imports.tf file, how to name it. So I go with the default. And now it's generating the import blocks. Okay, let's see. So we have now this imports.tf file, and let's take a look at it. Yeah, it imports the sub-account that is missing. That's the 2FD one. That's not the one that I've copied before. And it has the environment instance, which is under the well-known sub-account with the ID 583 and so on and so forth. So this is kind of what we experimented with, and now we would like to hear your opinion on that. Do you think that this is a useful feature that we should follow up on? Or do you say, nah, we don't need that. We have our own ways how to do that. Super curious to hear your feedback. Let me know, or let us know. The perfect place to come back with that is this issue on GitHub, where we kind of described our ideas, what we would like to do. I will also reference the video there, and I will reference this GitHub issue underneath the video that you are just watching. Now, with that, I hope you get some ideas what we would like to achieve with that, and we love to hear your feedback if you think that this is useful or this is something that we should not move forward with. Thanks a lot, and see you next time. Bye.